The CNC machine was screaming like a banshee when I walked into the production floor at 6:15 a.m. 15 minutes earlier than usual because Mondays in manufacturing don't care about your weekend recovery time. My radio crackled with 3 different crisis reports before I even grabbed my safety glasses. Hydraulic leak on line 3, came the first. Quality reject on the Ford batch, said the second. The third one made me smile grimly. New systems dashboard is down again. That last one wasn't even my department anymore, but somehow when technology failed, it always found its way back to me. Rob Sullivan, 54 years old, and I've been keeping this place running for 16 years. I knew every bolt, every supplier quirk, every safety protocol that kept Cardinal Manufacturing Systems from becoming a lawsuit magnet. I wasn't just the senior operations director. I was the guy who made sure 380 people had jobs and our automotive clients got their precision parts on time. Now here's the thing about manufacturing that most people don't understand. When you see those smooth production lines and everything flowing like clockwork, that's not automation working. That's 16 years of knowing that supplier A delivers on Tuesdays but calls in sick every other Friday, or that machine 7 needs specific lubrication that costs 30% more but prevents $50,000 failures. It's understanding that the maintenance schedule isn't just dates on a calendar. It's the difference between meeting Ford's delivery deadline and explaining to 200 workers why their overtime got canceled. I grabbed my coffee, black as motor oil and twice as necessary, and headed into my corner office overlooking the production floor. The kind of controlled chaos only someone like me could appreciate. If a supplier shipment was late, I could have alternate sourcing lined up in 20 minutes. If OSHA showed up unannounced, I had every compliance document they wanted before they finished their introductions. Nobody threw parades for that kind of work. It wasn't the flashy stuff that got mentioned in board meetings or LinkedIn posts. It was the foundation that kept everything else from collapsing. Let me tell you about my relationship with Richard Hartwell, the owner. Back in 2008, when Cardinal was struggling and almost went under during the recession, I was the one who renegotiated supplier terms to keep us afloat. While Richard was having panic attacks about cash flow, I was on the phone with Jerry Kowalski from Detroit Precision Steel, working out payment schedules that saved both our companies. When the automotive industry crashed and everyone was laying off, I figured out how to retool our equipment for agricultural machinery parts, kept 340 jobs when our competitors were shuttering plants. Richard knew this. For years, he'd introduced me to clients as the guy who actually runs this place. He'd joke that I knew more about manufacturing than he'd ever forgotten. But something changed after his health scare last year. Maybe it was the stress, maybe it was his family pushing him, but Richard started talking about legacy planning and bringing fresh perspectives to operations. Corporate speak for my son needs a job and my nephew has an MBA. So when my email pinged at 7:43 with a document titled Operations Transition Framework, Draft, I figured it was some intern's misfiled attachment, until I opened it. No greeting, no context, just a 2-page outline with my name, the words Knowledge Transfer Timeline, and a signature line waiting for me to sign away 16 years of my life. No sender listed, no follow-up contact, like the document had materialized from some corporate fever dream. The thing referenced systems I hadn't even authorized access to yet. Process flows that took me years to develop. Quality protocols I'd written after learning hard lessons about what happens when you cut corners in precision manufacturing. I flagged it, added a note, missing authorization chain, no sender verification, won't sign, and dropped it into my review folder. Then I went back to the real crisis, a hydraulic failure that had shut down our highest margin production line, and a quality issue that could cost us our Ford contract if I didn't fix it fast. While I was knee-deep in damage control, dealing with the kind of problems that don't solve themselves with motivational posters and team-building exercises, something was brewing in the executive wing. See, Richard had been back from his medical leave for exactly 3 days, and he was already making moves. Not the kind of moves you make when you understand operations, but the kind you make when you've been reading too many business magazines about disrupting traditional industries. By noon, I'd sorted the hydraulic issue, reworked the Ford batch to spec, and even managed to source replacement tooling for next week's production run. I live for this stuff. Give me a problem with moving parts and supplier relationships, and I'll solve it before lunch. The hydraulic leak turned out to be a worn seal on line 3's main press. Nothing dramatic, but if we'd let it go another day, we'd be looking at $35,000 in repairs and 2 weeks of downtime. The Ford quality issue was trickier, some dimensional variance in our precision bushings that their incoming inspection caught. Took me 45 minutes to trace it back to a tool wear problem on our Mazak CNC lathe, but once I found it, the fix was straightforward. That's the invisible work that guys like me do. We don't just put out fires, we prevent the ones that would shut down the whole operation. We know that quality isn't about checking boxes on an audit form, it's about understanding why those boxes exist in the first place. Every procedure, every safety protocol, every supplier qualification, there's a story behind it, usually involving someone learning an expensive lesson. So when my assistant knocked and said, "Rob, the owner's back from his sabbatical, he wants to sit in on the 2 p.m. operations review," I just nodded. Richard hadn't attended an operations review in 2 years, usually sent his apologies and asked for the summary email. But after 8 months of wellness retreats and whatever else rich guys do when they have health scares, maybe he wanted to reconnect with the business. "Richard Hartwell's back?" I asked, half wondering if she meant some consultant with the same name. "Yep, and he's bringing his son Cameron. Says they have some strategic updates to discuss." Of course they did. Strategic updates. In my experience, strategic updates usually meant someone with an MBA had drawn some charts and convinced themselves they'd discovered something revolutionary about a business they'd never actually worked in. But Richard was the owner, and after 16 years of partnership, I figured I owed him the courtesy of listening to whatever vision he'd cooked up during his time away. I straightened my shirt, grabbed my project files, and walked into that 2 p.m. meeting with my usual confidence and a growing sense that Monday was about to get interesting. The conference room smelled like whiteboard markers and nervous energy. Operations review, second Tuesday of every month at 2 p.m., usually meant budget updates, production metrics, and me explaining why we couldn't just automate everything like the younger crowd wanted. Everyone was settling in with their coffee when the door opened. Richard Hartwell walked in looking like a man who'd spent 8 months discovering himself and didn't like what he found. Thinner, grayer, but his smile was too wide. Not relief to be back, more like anticipation. Behind him came 2 guys I'd heard about but never met. His son Cameron, 28, looking like he'd stepped out of a business school recruiting poster. Expensive suit, confident stride, and that particular brand of arrogance that comes with an MBA and 0 real-world experience. Next to him was Quinn Morrison, Richard's nephew, fresh out of Stanford and already scrolling on his phone while walking. Strike one in my book. Richard clapped his hands once. "Team, I want to introduce Cameron and Quinn. They've been studying our operations from a strategic perspective. Today we're going to discuss some exciting structural improvements." Now here's what you need to understand about that phrase, studying our operations from a strategic perspective. In manufacturing, you don't study operations from a distance. You study them by getting your hands dirty, understanding why machine 4 makes that clicking noise on cold mornings, or knowing which supplier actually tests their material certificates versus which ones just print pretty documents. But Cameron stepped forward like he was about to pitch venture capital. "Thanks, Dad. Quinn and I have identified significant optimization opportunities in our current operational framework." He actually said that with a straight face. "We're implementing a digital transformation initiative that will streamline legacy processes and enhance our competitive positioning." I heard enough buzzwords to last me until retirement. Legacy processes. That's what 16 years of keeping this place profitable had become. Legacy processes. But then Cameron said the words that made the room go quiet. "As part of this transition, we'll be redistributing some operational responsibilities. Rob's been doing incredible work, but it's time to leverage younger talent who understand modern manufacturing technologies." The silence that followed was the kind you hear right before a machine fails catastrophically. Tony Valdez, our floor supervisor, actually choked on his coffee. Janet from Quality Control was staring at Cameron like he'd just announced we were switching to making bicycles instead of precision automotive parts. I didn't gasp or argue or ask questions. I reached into my briefcase, pulled out my badge, my building access card, and my equipment keys. Each one hit the conference table with a distinct metallic click. Then I stood up, nodded once to the room, and walked out. Behind me someone whispered, "Wait. That's it?" That was it. You want to replace the guy who knows where every skeleton is buried? Don't expect a training manual. Good luck running 16 years of institutional knowledge on enthusiasm and PowerPoint slides. Let me tell you what happened next, because this is where it gets interesting. I walked straight to my office, locked the door, and took a deep breath. Not because I was panicking, because I was prepared. You don't work operations for 16 years without building documentation systems. Not just the official procedures that look good during audits, but the real knowledge that keeps production running. See, there's a difference between what's written in the procedure manuals and what actually works. The manual says to lubricate the main bearing on line 2 every 200 hours. But I knew from experience that bearings start showing wear symptoms at 180 hours if the ambient temperature runs above 78 degrees, which it does every summer when our HVAC system struggles to keep up. The manual doesn't mention that Jerry Kowalski from Detroit Precision Steel will expedite emergency orders if you call him directly instead of going through their customer service system, or that our Ford quality inspector, Patricia Martinez, prefers dimensional reports formatted in metric, even though Ford's official specs are in inches. That's the knowledge you can't transfer in a handoff meeting. It lives in relationships built over years, in understanding the quirks of machinery that has personality, in knowing which suppliers will actually deliver on their promises, and which ones are just good at making excuses. 5 minutes later, my computer chimed with an HR message. Subject, transition support process. Body, hi Rob, thank you for your years of service. Attached is the knowledge transfer checklist. Please ensure all processes are documented for Cameron and Quinn by end of week. We appreciate your cooperation during this transition. Best regards, HR team. I stared at that smiley face emoji in what was essentially my termination notice. The audacity was almost impressive. They wanted me to document 16 years of manufacturing expertise in a week-long handoff to 2 guys whose greatest operational experience was probably troubleshooting their home Wi-Fi networks. I clicked reply and typed slowly. Thank you. Please direct all transition requests through legal counsel. My attorney will respond appropriately. Hit send. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it Succession Documentation. Because here's something about manufacturing companies like Cardinal. They survive on knowledge continuity. And continuity lives in relationships, in understanding tolerances, in knowing which supplier will actually deliver on time and which one will leave you hanging when you need them most. The knowledge you don't transfer in a coffee chat with 2 guys whose greatest professional achievement was probably moderating some college business club. By 4 p.m., Cameron had already locked himself out of the quality management system. By 4:30, he'd requested admin access to databases that didn't use standard passwords. At 4:45, Quinn sent an email asking where we kept the digital files for supplier performance metrics. I sat in my office, finishing my coffee, watching 16 years of institutional knowledge disappear like smoke in a windstorm. Richard never followed up. No call, no email, not even a text message. That told me everything I needed to know. They thought I'd fight, plead, or try to prove my value. They didn't understand that I'd already taken everything valuable with me. Now here's what Cameron didn't know about our quality management system. It wasn't just software with login credentials. It was built around relationships and processes that took years to establish. When supplier A shipped material that was slightly out of spec, the system didn't automatically know that their metallurgy was actually superior, and we could accept it with a deviation approval. When Machine 7 started showing dimensional drift, the system couldn't tell you that the real issue was tool wear that happens predictably every 2,800 parts, not the 3,000 parts the manufacturer recommended. Cameron showed up Wednesday morning wearing a polo shirt that said "Innovate or Die" across the chest, which I found ironically appropriate. He bounced into the production floor like he was launching a startup, carrying an energy drink and calling an all-hands meeting that nobody had time for. You could smell the business school confidence on him like cologne mixed with complete ignorance of how manufacturing actually works. First order of business: implementing lean digital workflows for production scheduling. Now, production scheduling in precision manufacturing isn't something you optimize with an app you found online. It's a complex balance of machine capacity, material availability, customer priorities, and equipment maintenance windows, built on relationships with 47 different suppliers and 15 years of understanding which promises you can trust and which ones are just wishful thinking. Cameron, blessed with the confidence that only comes from never being catastrophically wrong about something important, decided to migrate our entire scheduling system to a cloud-based platform he'd discovered during his research phase. By 10:30 a.m., he'd uploaded our production data to a system that immediately flagged half our processes as non-standard. By 11:15, the software had automatically reordered our priorities based on optimization algorithms. By noon, we had 3 production lines sitting idle because the new system had scheduled materials that wouldn't arrive until next Tuesday. Let me tell you what happened next, because this is where you really start to see the difference between running a manufacturing operation and running a spreadsheet. Tony Valdez, our floor supervisor with 23 years at Cardinal, walked up to Cameron and said, "Kid, this new system just shut down line 2 because it thinks we're out of steel bar stock. We've got 2,000 pounds sitting right there." He pointed to a clearly marked inventory rack about 30 feet away. Cameron smiled like Tony was a child who didn't understand technology. "The system is learning our processes. There might be some initial calibration issues, but the AI will optimize everything once it has enough data." Tony looked at me through the office window. I shrugged. Not my circus anymore. But I knew what Tony was thinking, because I'd been thinking the same thing for 16 years. You can't run a factory with algorithms that don't understand the difference between having material in inventory and having the right material in the right place at the right time with the proper certifications. By Thursday, things got interesting in the way that makes insurance companies nervous. The automotive client portal started flagging our shipments as non-compliant. Turns out Cameron had modified our quality documentation format to match his new digital system, but he'd accidentally removed the automotive industry specification codes that Ford required for traceability. Simple mistake, except it meant $340,000 worth of precision parts were sitting in legal limbo because the paperwork didn't match industry standards that had been in place since before Cameron was born. Then Quinn decided to streamline our supplier relationships. He sent emails to 23 vendors announcing that Cardinal was optimizing our partnership portfolio and requesting updated pricing for a competitive bidding process. What Quinn didn't know was that 8 of those suppliers had exclusive agreements based on volume commitments I'd negotiated over years of relationship building. Another 6 were single-source providers for specialized materials that couldn't be easily replaced without months of qualification testing. Within 48 hours, I was getting phone calls at home. "Rob, what's going on over there? Some kid named Quinn is asking us to rebid contracts that are locked until next year." That was Jerry Kowalski from Detroit Precision Steel, a supplier relationship I'd built over 12 years of mutual respect and understanding. "Is this some kind of internal politics thing, or are you guys actually shopping around?" I told Jerry the truth. "I'm not there anymore. That's Cameron Hartwell and Quinn Morrison, the owner's son and nephew. They're implementing their vision for the company." Jerry was quiet for a moment. "Their vision doesn't include honoring existing agreements?" "Apparently not." "Well, that's unfortunate. We've had a good run, Rob. If you land somewhere else that needs reliable steel supply, give me a call." By Friday morning, the word hiccup had been used in 6 emails, 3 meetings, and 1 internal memo from Cameron titled "Transition Clarity and Optimism." I'd seen toddlers throw less delusional tantrums at Chuck E. Cheese. Friday morning came like a court summons. The ISO audit team arrived for our annual certification review, the one that keeps us qualified to supply automotive clients. Cameron greeted them wearing a t-shirt that said "Disruption is Innovation," and immediately started explaining how they were modernizing legacy compliance frameworks. The lead auditor, Patricia Hayes, a woman who'd been doing ISO reviews since before Cameron was born, listened politely and then asked to see our current quality management documentation. Cameron handed her a tablet with his new digital system pulled up, grinning like he'd just solved world hunger with a smartphone app. Patricia scrolled through it for about 3 minutes, then looked up with the expression of someone who'd just been handed a crayon drawing when she asked for architectural blueprints. "Mr. Hartwell, this appears to be missing several required documentation elements. Where are your supplier qualification records?" "They're all digitized now," Cameron said confidently. "Much more efficient than paper files. I need to see the actual qualification audits, material certifications, and traceability documentation." Cameron's confidence flickered like a fluorescent light about to burn out. "Quinn handles that part of the system." "Quinn?" Quinn looked up from his phone with the expression of someone who just realized he was supposed to be paying attention. "It's all in the cloud database. I can pull up any supplier information you need." Patricia waited. Quinn typed on his tablet, typed some more. His expression gradually changed from confident to concerned to the kind of panic you see when someone realizes they've just driven into a lake. The system seems to be loading slowly today. What Quinn didn't know was that our supplier qualification records weren't just data points in a spreadsheet. They were physical certifications, signed agreements, test results, and relationship histories that I'd maintained in a filing system that was both digital and physical, the kind of backup documentation that keeps you compliant when systems fail and auditors start asking uncomfortable questions. Patricia made notes in her audit folder with the methodical precision of someone documenting a train wreck. I'll need to see those records before we can complete the certification review. That's when Cameron realized he might have a problem bigger than his startup fantasies could handle. He pulled out his phone and called me. 6 times in a row. I didn't answer. The 7th time, he left a voicemail that I still have saved. "Rob, hey, it's Cameron. We're having some technical difficulties with the documentation system. Could you swing by and help us locate a few files? It would really help the team out." I listened to the message, smiled, and deleted it. Now here's what you need to understand about ISO certifications in manufacturing. They're not suggestions or guidelines. They're requirements that determine whether you can sell to major automotive companies. Without ISO certification, Cardinal couldn't supply Ford, GM, or any other serious manufacturer. It's like trying to drive without a license. You might get away with it for a while, but eventually, someone's going to ask to see your papers. Meanwhile, something interesting was happening across town. Janet Torres, the COO of Precision Dynamics, a smaller but growing manufacturing company, had been watching Cardinal's situation develop through industry channels. She reached out to me the previous Friday with a proposition that made a lot more sense than anything I'd heard from Cameron and Quinn. "Rob, we've been following your work for years. Quality management systems, supplier relationships, safety protocols. We're looking for someone to head up our operations expansion. Interested in a conversation?" I was very interested. Precision Dynamics was everything Cardinal could have been with proper leadership. Growing, stable, focused on building expertise rather than disrupting it for the sake of disruption. They offered me senior operations director with equity participation and complete authority over process development. I started Monday. No drama, no announcements, just moved from one company that didn't value institutional knowledge to one that did. My first week, I helped them land a contract with a major agricultural equipment manufacturer, leveraging supplier relationships that Cameron and Quinn had just blown up. Back at Cardinal, the ISO audit results came in like a death certificate. Certification suspended pending documentation compliance. 6 months to remediate or lose automotive qualification entirely. The Ford contract was placed under review. 3 suppliers had terminated their agreements, citing breach of terms that Quinn didn't even know existed. Cameron sent me one last email. Subject: urgent, company crisis. Body: Rob, we really need your help. Things have gotten complicated and we could use your expertise to stabilize the situation. Whatever it takes to get you back, we're open to discussing it. I forwarded it to my new boss at Precision Dynamics with a note. This is why institutional knowledge matters, and why you hire people for their expertise, not their age. She wrote back, "Glad we got you when we did. Your supplier network is going to be invaluable for our expansion." 6 weeks later, I heard through industry contacts that Cardinal had hired a consulting firm to rebuild their quality management system. Cost: $280,000. Timeline: 8 months. Success: probability: uncertain, since they'd lost their automotive certification and 2 major suppliers. Richard called me one more time. I answered. "Rob, I owe you an apology. We made some mistakes in how we handled your transition." "Richard, you didn't handle my transition. You replaced me with your son and nephew and hoped for the best. What would it take to get you to come back? Consulting arrangement, temporary basis, whatever you need." I looked out the window of my new office at Precision Dynamics, where the production floor was humming efficiently and our quality metrics were trending upward. "Richard, I'm not coming back. I'm building something better." That was 4 months ago. Cardinal finally regained their ISO certification last month, but they lost the Ford contract and laid off 60 people. Precision Dynamics just landed a new automotive client and we're hiring 25 more production workers. The moral isn't that young people can't learn manufacturing, it's that you don't replace experience with enthusiasm and expect the machines to keep running.